What is up, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the debut album by Eazy-E. He's an n.w.a member, and he dropped this project in late summer of 1988. There's kind of two different scenarios as to the release date of this project. Wikipedia says it dropped in mid-late November of 1988, but there's also resources that I've seen that said it dropped in September of 88. So I don't remember when exactly it did. Not really sure, but it dropped somewhere in the fall or late summer of 1988. And this basically came out right on the heels of Straight Outta Compton by n.w.a from like the summer of 1988, August of 88. So that's definitely the thing. Eazy was the first one to break and go solo and try to get further valves started with the Ruthless Records label and that type of stuff. It was definitely interesting just because this is definitely an album from the golden age of hip hop between like the late 80s and early 90s and stuff. And this is a pretty central album. I probably am going to give this about the same score that I gave the DOC project, where there's 12 songs on here and I like more than half, but there is some dated production on here. And the concept about it, there are a lot of breakaway singles, but they're different from what I had seen. Like, I know enough about Eazy-E. I definitely have known him for quite a while, but the concept about it, I know Eazy-E pretty well, but this is an album I'm not entirely familiar with. I only know like maybe a couple songs on here, but I do at least know that there's some quality. And from what I listened to recently, this is another stacked up. And I would definitely say this would be a good 1-2 punch to get, especially back in the 80s, as far as getting, if you were going to get Straight Outta Compton by n.w.a, this would be like the follow-up project to get. It's just a good 1-2 punch, and these are two really great records from rap music out of 1988. Or this is kind of a year that I don't know an overabundance about. I know there's at least like the It Takes a Nation to Millions album by Public Enemy, but this is probably one of the few albums as of this point that I could really recommend if you're looking for 1988, 1987 music from rap music. That's definitely kind of thing, but it is pretty state of the art in some senses in terms of impact and revolutionariness and what it did for California rap and gangsta rap and that type stuff, and just the overall concept of the golden age of hip hop. It's a very important album, but looking back, basically almost 35 years later, it doesn't quite hold. I mean, it stands the test of time, but in terms of being like seen as a classic album or something that's just like, you know, just has not wavered at all in the past 35 years, is not quite as seen as to where that kind of goes, but it is pretty solid. This would have to say Eazy-E has an impactful character, despite the fact that he is not like a super lyricist. I feel like his writers, Ice Cube, DOC, and like MC Ren wrote some of his lyrics. That he had three good lyric writers to help him out with this, and Ice Cube was around in n.w.a in 1988, so that's kind of the concept here. This is kind of, it's an interesting point. There's not really many guests on here. I really thought that there would have been like more folks on here, like maybe Ice Cube or DOC or something like that. But really, the only other guest feature that's on here, apart from Eazy being on this album, is just MC Ren, who only shows up once. So this kind of thing, I guess they just assumed that if you were going to want to hear more features on here, you would have just checked out the n.w.a album. But this is basically Eazy-E through and through. And then on top of that, the concept kind of is that on his singles, he doesn't really cuss that much. He's not really using foul language as much, just because he says a few times on the album that he was trying to get airplay with this and try to get some credibility as far as promotion and that type of stuff, just because I think they realized that the n.w.a album didn't really get a ton of promotion. So they had to kind of walk the walk as far as like, getting airplay. So this is a little bit between this album, Eazy-Duz-It, and Straight Outta Compton. Straight Outta Compton definitely has the better singles, but I think the approach that Eazy-E kind of had with the attempt of trying to craft these songs for radio is to be admired. It just didn't. I mean, it has pretty much like, it's just like kind of a stopgap between Straight Outta Compton and Niggas for Life from 1991. It's just another good placeholder to kind of have for something to sate the appetite and that type of stuff. But we'll go ahead and talk about the singles. So the first single, the lead single, is Eazy-Duz-It, and this one's kind of an odd one. I mean, it doesn't stick to this particular type of beat. It kind of varies throughout the three verses and stuff. But I definitely feel like this song is like a day in the life of Eazy-E. This really has three verses, him telling a story of just like a typical day that he's up to and stuff. It starts off kind of being like a city traverse tune with him just kind of cruising around. It's kind of what I got from it. It's just kind of like a song for being amongst the city, hop and bop, kind of travel, that type of stuff, getting stuff done. And then it kind of switches. It's in between kind of like this on foot city traverse and kind of cruising in your car and that type stuff. I mean, either way, it can be seen as just like traverse. I just look at the concept of this kind of cityscaping. First two verses kind of does that, but then the third verse kind of ends in like a dazed, and Eazy-E goes to prison in the third verse, and it kind of talks about just being, at least the production kind of winds up being kind of dazed and smoky, where you just kind of look after it. Maybe you're cruising around and you find your buddy's house or somewhere to go to kind of smoke and get a little bit stoned and that type of stuff. So it's just interesting kind of get that, or just as kind of like a experience of a song more so than just having the same beat, which I haven't seen happen too oftenly. So it's kind of revolutionary song. At first, it took me a little bit to get used to this song, but I do recognize the candor of it as far as respecting it. So this is a pretty nice one. And Easier Said Than Done is the second single. Now, this is a song I remember from Eazy-E. Definitely remember it from back in the day, like in Grand Theft Auto and stuff. But I would have to say here, this is probably one of the most presentable Eazy-E singles. I feel like this one's a little bit more radio ready. This feels like a real, the guitar licks on this song just make it for like a nice summer day romp. Just a nice casual city tune, just a cruise around kind of song. Just overall good feelings as far as being in the car or just going throughout the city and some of those type moments. Just a typical casual kind of hop and bop kind of song, just with like some lazy late summer day kind of festivities and casual kind of feelings and stuff. This is an easy kind of one. Has a great hook on here, good energy. Eazy tears apart this song. It's probably one of his definitive songs. This in my opinion, at least of 80s and early 90s, Eazy is probably one of his best songs, and it continues to stand strong. This is probably one of the first ones I'd recommend to go for on this album if you're trying this out and want to see what's up with it. If you didn't know it back in the 80s, 90s, or whenever, this would kind of say. The third single is We Want Easy. The third single is We Want Easy, and this is kind of like a song that's kind of amidst a concert. It kind of portrays as if Eazy-E is kind of performing this song, not just it being on the radio or in like a car or something like that. Just kind of the concept where you're actually at an Eazy-E concert. It just has that feel where they perform this live or something. This really feels like you can hear the crowd in the background and that type of stuff. But I do kind of like the kind of synthy kind of production that it kind of has. This really feels like another n.w.a. tune, just with a little bit more bop towards it. It's a very hype and eventful song, definitely for like an outdoor festivity, just cityscape fun, and it's kind of feel good. I like the concept where this one's just presentable in that sort of sense. It's just kind of an energetic kind of song, just Dr. Dre screaming on there. It's interesting to kind of hear him, what he would be like at a concert where there's just a lot of people. So this is kind of like a real kind of hype one, but I do kind of like, kind of reminds me of like Play That Funky Music by n.w.a. Has kind of similar production in the verses to that. And I mean, not bar for bar similar, but it just kind of gives me similar vibes to that, despite the fact that this song came out first. So this is kind of another cityscape kind of tune. I mean, there's a lot of cityscape kind of tunes on here. I just really like the concept of some of these, but this one definitely feels like, I will say that about We Want Easy. It's a very kind of hype song, and it just kind of has like, it should give you like chills as far as like the concept of just having a little bit more emphatic energy to where you maybe have some big events going on and just a little bit more stuff kind of on your mind as far as things that are going to kind of get you excited and stuff. So I definitely like the candor of that song, being able to have like some more than just a typical regular kind of day, or this one's a little bit more with some meaning to it in terms of stepping out. Radio is the fourth single. I don't know how much this one was talked about, but Radio is kind of the most regular of all the singles. Doesn't really have like a city kind of pace or a concert kind of pace or like a party kind of pace. This really feels like a simple, kind of typical tune with like some decent bumps. Just really a mid-grades kind of social number, or it can kind of be something you play at like a buddy's house or like your pals or someplace where there'd be a few folks and events and that type situation. But it's just kind of, it's just really kind of mid grades. I just would have to say it's just got like a decent bumps kind of here and there. It's not like an everyday Eazy-E. It's not like an everyday Eazy-E kind of tune, but I still like it enough to kind of say just more. And it's kind of like that off the wall and kind of bluesy third or fourth or fifth single that you just don't hear every day, like maybe once every 3 or 4 months back in the day when it would have been popular to have heard it, something like that. It's just kind of an odd one, but it didn't seem like it charted, but I still respect the fact that it was a single and kind of is pretty decent mid bump and that sort of thing. So yeah, that's the 4 singles. So to basically talk about it beyond that, there were 7 songs I recommend on here. Basically 6 songs and 1 kind of song I was on the fence about, which is an almost song. So those 6 songs I recommend would be Easier Said Than Done, We Want Easy, Radio, Nobody Move, Two Hard Mothers, Eazy-Duz-It, and then the Almost song was No More Questions. So I've talked about the 4 singles. The reason why No More Questions is an Almost song is because the beat loop on this particular song gets tiresome a little bit quicker. This is a little bit more short and just not quite as like emphatic as some of the rest of the beats on here. It reminds me of a beat off of Straight Outta Compton, or like a song like Two Hard Mothers, or kind of easier said than done, but just not nearly as catchy as easier said than done. But I do like the concept. It's definitely like No More Questions is a secondary. No More Questions is a secondary day kind of tune. I definitely feel like when you listen to like a song like Gangsta Gangsta or Straight Outta Compton off the N.w.a album, this is kind of a secondary day, or this kind of reminds me of more Tuesday errands, or if you have your Monday songs that you listen to when you go out and about through the city, this would kind of be a secondary kind of day, like a Tuesday, maybe even a Wednesday, something like that, but still kind of out and about. I do like this song. It's clever just because it's just about the concept of interviewers asking questions and Eazy-E answers them in a rap verse. This is kind of an interactive song where the second verse kind of deals with Eazy-E breaking into houses and that type of stuff, and it kind of deals with the kind of more covert kind of moments in like the song as far as that kind of goes. And I kind of feel like, but the thing about No More Questions is that the beat loop is just kind of, it gets tiresome quicker than the rest of the beats on here, which is not too bad. I like this song enough to probably listen to it, but it just would take some getting used to wholesomely to admit that I would like this song more wholesomely. But that's kind of the concept. Two Hard Mothers has a better variation of that type beat. It's a very paced kind of city tune. It's got stuff to get done. It just feels like a song where you kind of got maybe not so much work or responsibilities, but maybe just some tasks that need to get done with you and a buddy. This kind of reminds me of one of the few songs. This has MC Ren on here. It's basically the only other verse that you're going to hear by someone else that's not Eazy-E. But I do like the kind of pace of this one. Two Hard Mothers is just a busier sounding version, and No More Questions and easier said than done. So it's got that same sort of cityscaping kind of feel, but it's just kind of in a more busy sense. And then Nobody Move is kind of and then Nobody Move is kind of like a saloon like song. It's very old school. It seems like old school kind of bar hopping kind of song, very mellow and kind of a regular day, just stepping out, maybe getting some drinks, that sort of thing. But the lyrics on this song depict Eazy-E robbing a bank and that type of stuff. So this, you have to, the lyrics on this song depict Eazy-E robbing a bank. So when I talk about this kind of being like a bar hopping song, the lyrics don't match up with it. But it's just the production is so mellow and kind of saloon like. It just gives me those kind of vibes. So yeah, it has like obviously the lyrics on here are kind of to be taken to the concept of being gangsta rap. It's just the concept of where you listen to it and how that kind of goes, because this is kind of an edgy album and it was kind of hardcore back in 1988, but this is the concept of where you listen to it. I just get the vibes of just going to like a bar, especially for folks who did that back in 1991 and stuff, just to kind of see that sort of thing. It's just kind of simplistic, kind of getting a mug of beer, or just like a Budweiser or something like that, those kind of moments. So, but to talk about the 5 songs I didn't enjoy, like I like that Eazy-E for a number of times puts Boys in the Hood on here, but I kind of feel like probably the original Boys in Hood, probably the original Boys in the Hood that's on n.w.a.'s 1987 album's the best one. I feel like that's the one I'm going to like the most. I just didn't care for these remixes. I would have to say eventually I will review n.w.a. from 1987. I'll get to that. I kind of feel like Ruthless Villain just didn't have quite a compelling enough beat, and plus Eazy-E was barely on the song. It was mostly just MC Ren rapping. I would have liked if they both would have traded better. I would have liked if they would have both traded verses on the song and had both dual verses on there, but it's mostly just MC Ren. The beat wasn't that interesting. And then Still Talking was kind of like a country rap kind of tune that just didn't suit Eazy-E that well. It felt like very odd to start off the album with that. I didn't like the last 2 songs in the album either. I'm going to break it down in Easy Chapter 8, Verse 10. Both of those just kind of had like some piss poor productions that just were not compelling compared to some of the best beats on here, like Easier Said Than Done and Two Hard Mothers, and like the kind of visceral kind of experience like approach of Eazy-Duz-It, or kind of like the hype kind of feel We Want Easy, or some of those. And even Radio is probably better than like some of these kind of more lackluster beats on here. So this is kind of the thing. But this is kind of the concepts. There's really only 5, but then that being almost half the album kind of makes the situation about it. But I just kind of look after it. So me liking 6.5 songs out of 12, where I kind of feel like I would almost give No More Questions just because I think I could like it, but I'm just not quite wholesomely sold on like the beat on No More Questions. It's a good cityscaping kind of secondary kind of tune, but I still kind of feel like the adjustments towards I just kind of am in between. Maybe it could be the seventh song, but I look after it, me liking basically 6.5 or 7 songs out of 12. I would say that this project's just going to get like a 6.75 out of 10. I feel like that's pretty good to be able to say that. It's over half the project, and I did like all of the singles. So I just would have to say that I liked all the singles. It's pretty impactful. Eazy has a compelling personality, and he adds the punch to these songs. And despite the fact that he's not a lyricist, he manages to show off. Despite the fact that he's not a lyricist, he manages to show off like the concept of making an interesting album and a definitive kind of revolutionary album just in the impact of what happened. I definitely feel like this is an easy kind of companion piece to like the gangster rap fold. I definitely feel like if you're going to get Straight Outta Compton and you've got some extra money, you need to get Eazy-Duz-It as well. It's just these go as like a great 1-2 punch, definitely a good taste of 1988 rap music, and this would create it would go from just having 3 singles to like 5 or 6 as far as the more hits that you could have around this time. So it's good to kind of get some of these, especially considering that these are 35-year-old albums. So it just kind of has that kind of pitch. And I would have to say like 6.75 out of 10. The social score I'm going to give a 5.75 out of 10 because easier said than done is the most impactful song. It's probably the magnet, the bullseye for the one that you should go for. We Want Easy is a pretty hype kind of concert like song that has some good energizing feels, and then Eazy-Duz-It's like a day in the life that just is fun to listen to, but it's kind of mid, this album. I just kind of feel like it has like these tunes as far as like the cityscape, but it doesn't really have like a super kind of size song that's like a killer. You bought the album for this, apart from like maybe a couple of the singles. That just kind of happens to be the thing. It's good. It definitely is for stepping out in city traverse, but there's not really, because this is trying to be radio friendly gangster rap. It doesn't really have like the 40-ounce songs, the smoking songs, the women songs and the dancing songs and that type of stuff, and even like the cruising around car songs minus the Boys in the Hood remix. That just kind of happens to be a thing. So it's just kind of spotty. 5.75 is the social. It's an impactful album, but it's not really like a tumultuous weekend album. So in terms of the future, that's difficult because Eazy-E is deceased, but I am going to review some more of these n.w.a and Eazy-E projects because there are a few more. So